Welcome back to the channel, everyone. Imagine opening an old coin collection, searching through a jar of inherited change, or looking through a box of vintage United States coins. At first glance, it might look like an ordinary 5-cent coin from more than 8 decades ago. Today we're talking the fascinating coins. Coin number 1. This Jefferson nickel is no mint mark. The coin is in what appears to be very fine condition, and someone tells you that a coin like this could be worth as much as $132,000 in today's market. That is an extraordinary claim, and it immediately raises several important questions. Is every 1,940 Jefferson nickel without a mint mark worth a fortune? Is the $132,000 figure realistic for a normal, very fine example? Or could an exceptionally unusual variety, error, provenance, or condition be responsible for such a dramatic valuation? In this video, we are going to examine the 1,940 Jefferson nickel from every important angle, including its history, design, minting background, composition, condition, varieties, grading, authentication, and the factors that can turn an ordinary old nickel into a potentially important numismatic discovery. Before we go any further, there is one extremely important point for collectors. A 1,940 Jefferson nickel without a mint mark is Philadelphia minted coin, and the Philadelphia Mint did not place a mint mark on these nickels. Major numismatic references list the 1,940 Philadelphia issue at roughly 176.5 million pieces, making it a high mintage issue rather than a conventional rarity. PCGS lists the 1,940 nickel as a Philadelphia issue with a mintage of 176,485.0, while NGC likewise identifies the coin a Philadelphia minted copper-nickel issue. This is an important fact because the absence of a mint mark by itself does not make the 1,940 nickel rare. In fact, for this particular date, the lack of a mint mark is exactly what we expect to see on a Philadelphia example. The 1,940 Jefferson nickel belongs to one of the most recognizable coin series in American history. The Jefferson nickel was introduced in 1938, replacing the Buffalo nickel, and it featured President Thomas Jefferson on the obverse and his historic home, Monticello, on the reverse. The design was created by Felix Schlag, whose work became one of the defining images of American coinage in the 20th century. The 1,940 issue therefore comes from the very early years of the Jefferson nickel series, making it historically interesting even when the individual coin is not particularly rare. The obverse of the 1,940 Jefferson nickel features a left-facing portrait of Thomas Jefferson. Around the portrait are the inscriptions Liberty, the date 1,940, and the motto In God We Trust. When examining an old example, collectors should pay close attention to the lettering, the date, the edges of the portrait, and the overall sharpness of the design. On a heavily circulated coin, some of these features may become worn, while on a better preserved example, the lettering and portrait can remain considerably clearer. The reverse is equally important. It displays Monticello, Jefferson's Virginia estate, with the inscriptions E pluribus unum, United States of America, 5 cents, and Monticello. One of the most important characteristics collectors examine on Jefferson nickels is the quality of the steps beneath Monticello. These steps can become a major factor when evaluating high-grade examples. Coins with exceptionally sharp, uninterrupted steps may qualify for designations such as full steps, often abbreviated as FS. For advanced Jefferson nickel collectors, full steps can dramatically influence desirability and price, especially at very high mint state grades. The 1,940 Philadelphia Jefferson nickel was struck from a composition of approximately 75% copper and 25% nickel. It weighs about 5 grams, measures approximately 21.2 millimeters in diameter, and has a plain edge. This means that the 1,940 nickel is not one of the famous wartime silver Jefferson nickels. The silver composition began later, during World War II, when nickel was strategically important for military production. So if you find a normal 1,940 Jefferson nickel, you should not assume that it contains silver simply because it is an old coin. Now let's focus specifically on the no mint mark designation. On Jefferson Nickels of this period, the mint mark was located on the reverse, to the right of Monticello. A Denver coin would carry a D, while a San Francisco coin would carry an S. A Philadelphia coin did not carry a mint mark. Therefore, if your 1940 nickel has no D or S in the expected location, that is consistent with a Philadelphia issue. The absence of a mint mark should not automatically be described as an error. In this case, it is normal. This is where the story becomes especially interesting, because collectors sometimes confuse a normal missing mint mark with a rare minting error. A coin that was intentionally produced at Philadelphia without a mint mark is completely different from a coin that should have carried a mint mark but somehow failed to receive one. For a 1940 Philadelphia nickel, there is no missing mint mark error simply because the coin has no mint mark. The no mint mark status identifies the Philadelphia issue. This is an important lesson for every coin collector. A coin's value is not determined simply by its age. Being more than 80 years old does not automatically make a nickel worth thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars. Coin value is usually driven by a combination of rarity, condition, demand, variety, errors, historical importance, eye appeal, and authentication. A common coin in circulated condition can remain inexpensive even after many decades, while a rare variety in exceptional condition can become extremely valuable. The 1940 Jefferson Nickel is actually a perfect example of this principle. Its mintage was very large, and substantial numbers survive today. PCGS describes the issue as common in both circulated and uncirculated grades, although exceptional examples and full steps pieces can become much more desirable. NGC also notes that the high mintage makes the issue common across most grades. So if you have a typical 1940 Philadelphia nickel in very fine condition, the coin is historically interesting, but not ordinarily a six-figure rarity. However, collectors should never dismiss an old nickel without examining it carefully. The first thing to inspect is the date. Make sure the coin actually says 1940th. Old coins can be difficult to read, and damage or corrosion can sometimes make one digit resemble another. Use good lighting, and if necessary, magnification. Do not rely on a photograph alone if the coin might be valuable. Next, examine the mint mark area on the reverse. On a normal 1940 Philadelphia nickel, you should see no D or S next to Monticello. If you believe you see a strange mark, discoloration, or unusual shape, do not immediately assume it is a mint error. It could be damage, a scratch, corrosion, or another post-mint alteration. Professional examination is especially important when a coin appears to show an unusual feature. The next step is to inspect the overall strike. Jefferson Nickels can display differences in strike quality, and collectors pay special attention to Monticello and the steps beneath it. If you discover a 1940 nickel with unusually sharp details despite its age, it may deserve closer attention. However, full steps designations are generally relevant to uncirculated coins rather than ordinary circulated very fine examples. A worn VF coin cannot become a full steps rarity simply because the steps are visible. Another feature worth checking is the surface. Look for scratches, gouges, stains, corrosion, discoloration, cleaning, or unnatural polishing. A coin can look shiny but actually be worth less because it has been harshly cleaned. Original surfaces are often more desirable to collectors than artificially brightened surfaces. If you believe your 1940 nickel could be valuable, resist the temptation to clean it. Never use abrasive materials, metal polish, chemicals, toothpaste, or other household products to make an old coin look newer. One of the most important things a collector can do is compare the coin with authenticated examples. Look at high-quality photographs from established numismatic references and grading services. Compare the lettering, portrait, Monticello, date, and other design elements. If something seems dramatically different, that is when professional attribution becomes worthwhile. Let's also consider the history surrounding the year 1940. This was a fascinating period in American history. The United States was still officially outside World War II, although events in Europe and Asia were rapidly changing the global political landscape. The American economy was emerging from the Great Depression, industrial production was expanding, and the country was moving toward the massive mobilization that would follow America's entry into World War II. A Jefferson nickel dated 1940 therefore represents a physical piece of pre-war American history. Imagine holding a coin that may have circulated through stores, banks, gas stations, restaurants, and households during the early 1940s. It could have passed through countless hands before eventually being placed into a collection or forgotten in an old container. That historical journey is part of what makes coin collecting so fascinating. Next coin, number 2. A 1968 with D. Jefferson nickel, very fine rare, could supposedly be worth $132,000 in today's market. At that moment, an ordinary-looking 5-cent coin suddenly becomes the center of attention. Is this a genuine treasure hiding in plain sight? Or is the six-figure figure connected to a rare error, an unusual variety, or an exceptionally high-grade example, rather than a normal, very fine coin? In this video, we are going to take a detailed look at the 1968 with D Jefferson nickel, its history, design, mintage, condition, mint mark, varieties, errors, grading, and the evidence behind extraordinary value claims. The 1968 D nickel has a fascinating place in American coin history because it was produced during an unusual period for United States coinage. During the 1960s, the United States experienced a major coin shortage. In an effort to discourage speculation and hoarding, mint marks were temporarily removed from circulating U.S. coins beginning in the mid-1960s. The 1968 issue marked the return of mint marks on regular coinage, and the 1968 with D Jefferson nickel was struck at the Denver Mint. NGC specifically notes that mint marks returned to U.S. coins in 1968, and that the 1968 with D issue was produced during this transition. That historical background makes the 1968 with D nickel more interesting than its face value might suggest. It represents a period when the United States Mint was adapting to extraordinary demand for circulating coins. Production techniques, minting pressures, and the condition of dies all influence the quality of coins released into circulation. For collectors today, these historical circumstances help explain why certain 1968 Jefferson nickels can show interesting characteristics. The coin was produced using the standard Jefferson nickel composition of approximately 75% copper and 25% nickel. It has a diameter of about 21.2 millimeters. PCGS lists the regular strike 1968 with D nickel as having a plain edge and the traditional Felix Schlag Jefferson nickel design. Unlike the wartime Jefferson nickels of 1942 through 1945, the 1968 with D nickel is not a silver alloy wartime nickel. It should therefore not be valued as a silver coin. The 1968 with D issue is particularly interesting in this regard. NGC explains that the issue is plentiful in gem condition, but that coins displaying 5 or 6 full steps, commonly called full steps, are extremely rare. PCGS likewise notes that the 1968 with D nickel is common in most grades, but becomes an extreme rarity when it possesses full steps. This is one of the most important clues when trying to understand why some Jefferson nickels can sell for dramatically more than ordinary examples. A very fine coin, however, is fundamentally different from a full steps mint state coin. Very fine means the coin has circulated and has visible wear. Full steps designations are generally relevant to highly preserved, uncirculated Jefferson nickels. Therefore, if someone tells you that an ordinary 1968 with D nickel in very fine condition is automatically worth a huge amount because of its Monticello steps, you should be cautious. The grading process itself is extremely important. A coin graded very fine has experienced meaningful circulation. Depending on the exact grade, the design remains reasonably strong, but the original mint luster is usually gone from the high points because of wear. A coin in extremely fine condition will have more detail remaining, while an about uncirculated example will show only slight wear. Mint state coins have no circulation wear, although they can still have contact marks and other imperfections from the minting and handling process. Next, inspect the mint mark. The D identifies the Denver Mint, because mint marks return to regular U.S. coinage in 1968. Seeing a D on the reverse or in the appropriate location is an important identifying feature of this issue. If the mint mark appears unusual, enlarged, doubled, distorted, or strangely positioned, do not immediately conclude that you have a rare error. It could be damage, die deterioration, or an ordinary variation. Proper attribution is necessary before assigning a premium value. Another area to examine is the lettering. Look carefully at liberty, the date, and the motto. Collectors sometimes search for double die characteristics, especially because minor double die obverse varieties are known for the 1968 with D. Jefferson Nickel. NGC specifically notes that minor DDO varieties exist, along with some repunched mint mark varieties that have not become major collector favorites. This is an important distinction. The existence of a variety does not mean every coin showing a slightly unusual letter is valuable. A genuine double die is created during the die-making process and has identifiable characteristics. Random machine damage, scratches, flattening, or post-mint impacts do not create the same kind of collectible variety. If you believe your 1968 with D nickel has doubling, compare the suspected feature with reliable photographs and professional references. Look at the shape and location of the doubling rather than simply asking whether the letters appear thick. A real double die should demonstrate consistent characteristics associated with the die variety. The same principle applies to the D mint mark. A repunched mint mark can occur when a mint mark is punched into a working die more than once at different positions. However, not every unusual-looking D is a valuable RPM. Some apparent doubling can result from die wear, machine doubling, lighting, or damage. Professional attribution is the safest approach if the coin appears unusual. Now let's talk about the very fine condition specified for this 1968 with D nickel. A genuine VF example should show obvious circulation wear, but the major design remains intact. Jefferson's portrait should still be clearly visible, and the reverse should retain substantial Monticello detail. The letters and date should be legible. The coin may have scratches, small contact marks, discoloration, and other evidence of circulation, but severe damage can lower its desirability. Another major issue is cleaning. If you discover an old Jefferson nickel that looks unusually bright, do not assume that it is valuable because of its shine. It may have been cleaned or polished. Harsh cleaning can leave hairline scratches and unnatural surfaces that reduce collector appeal. Original surfaces are generally preferable. Never use toothpaste, metal polish, vinegar, abrasive cloths, or household chemicals to clean a potentially valuable coin. Even if the coin is worth only 5 cents, preserving its original condition is a better habit for any serious collector. The surfaces should also be inspected for corrosion. Jefferson Nickels can develop discoloration or surface problems depending on storage conditions. Dark spots, greenish deposits, pitting, or unusual stains can affect the coin's grade and marketability. Again, appearance alone is not enough to establish rarity. One of the most common mistakes made by beginning collectors is assuming that old equals rare. The 1968 D nickel is more than half a century old, but age alone does not make it scarce. More than 91 million were struck, and large numbers survive today. PCGS describes the 1968D issue as very common across grades, including gem mint state, while emphasizing the scarcity of full steps examples. That is a perfect illustration of how rarity actually works. The ordinary coin can be common, while a specific high-quality version of the same coin can be scarce. Think of it as two different populations. Millions of circulated or ordinary uncirculated examples may survive, but only a tiny number might survive with exceptional strike quality, immaculate surfaces, and complete Monticello steps. The coin also reflects the broader economic conditions of the period. The 1960s were a time of rapid economic and social change in the United States. Rising demand for coins placed pressure on the mint, and production decisions were influenced by the need to keep coins circulating. Holding a 1968 nickel is therefore not simply holding a 5-cent denomination, It is holding a small artifact from an important period in American monetary history. Another important point is that face value is not the same as collectible value. The coin is legally denominated at 5 cents, but collectors may pay more based on condition, rarity, and demand. At the same time, the existence of a collectible premium does not automatically mean the coin is worth hundreds, thousands, or tens of thousands of dollars. Next coin, number 3. This 1995 Jefferson nickel with P mint mark, telling you that this particular nickel was struck at the Philadelphia Mint. But then you notice something else. The coin has an unusually bright reddish-golden appearance, almost as though it has retained its original color and surfaces far better than an ordinary circulated nickel. Now imagine being told that a 1995 with P Jefferson nickel in this kind of red condition could be worth as much as $132,000 in today's market. Now let's travel back to 1995. The United States was in the middle of a period of tremendous technological and cultural change. The internet was beginning to transform communication, personal computers were becoming increasingly common, and American society was moving toward the digital age. Yet in everyday life, people still relied heavily on physical coins for vending machines, parking meters, public transportation, stores, banks, and countless other transactions. The Jefferson nickel was one of those familiar coins that most Americans barely noticed. The 1995 with P Jefferson nickel is part of the long-running Jefferson Nickel series that began in 1938. The design was created by Felix Schlag, and it features Thomas Jefferson on the obverse and Monticello on the reverse. By 1995, the design had already been familiar to Americans for more than 5 decades. The coin therefore represents both a modern circulating denomination and an important continuation of one of America's longest-running coin designs. The 1995 with P nickel was struck at the Philadelphia Mint, which is identified by the letter P. The mint mark is found on the reverse of the coin to the right of Monticello. This is an important detail because collectors sometimes confuse the presence of a P with a special rarity. The P mint mark simply identifies the Philadelphia Mint. It does not automatically mean the coin is rare. This is where the phrase full steps, often abbreviated FS, becomes important. Jefferson nickel collectors carefully examine the horizontal steps at the base of Monticello on the reverse. When these steps are sharply and completely struck, the coin can qualify for a full steps designation. Full steps examples are much more desirable to specialists, particularly in high mint state grades. However, there is a critical issue with the phrase red condition. Jefferson nickels are not normally described using the same red, red-brown, and brown color designations that collectors commonly use for copper Lincoln cents. A 1995 with P Jefferson nickel is a copper nickel coin, composed primarily of copper and nickel, and its standard professional grading terminology is centered on numerical grade, surface quality, strike, and designations such as full steps rather than a standard red designation. That reddish appearance deserves examination. A Jefferson nickel can sometimes display different shades because of toning, environmental exposure, storage conditions, oxidation, or surface contamination. Lighting can also make a nickel appear dramatically different in photographs. A red or golden color does not automatically indicate rarity. In fact, collectors should be careful when evaluating unusual coloration. A coin that has been chemically treated, artificially toned, heated, exposed to chemicals, or otherwise altered may have an interesting appearance, but not necessarily a higher value. Natural toning can sometimes be attractive and collectible, but artificial coloration can reduce desirability. The first thing to examine is the overall surface. Is the color evenly distributed? Does it appear natural? Are there signs of cleaning? Are there scratches or hairlines? Is the surface dull, glossy, or unusually reflective? Does the color appear only in certain areas? These questions can help determine whether the appearance is natural or the result of post-mint alteration. If the coin really has an unusual reddish color, resist the temptation to clean it. Do not polish it, rub it with a cloth, use metal cleaner, or apply household chemicals. Any attempt to change the surface could permanently damage the coin and eliminate valuable evidence about its original condition. The steps underneath Monticello are especially important. Look at them carefully under magnification. Are the horizontal lines complete? Do they merge together? Are there interruptions caused by contact marks? Is the strike strong enough to reveal all of the details? These questions are extremely important for advanced Jefferson nickel collectors. A coin can have an excellent overall appearance but still fail to qualify for full steps because the steps are weakly struck. Conversely, a sharply struck coin with clean surfaces can be considerably more desirable. This brings us to one of the biggest misconceptions about valuable Jefferson nickels. Many people see the words full steps and assume that any coin with visible steps is automatically rare. That is not correct. Professional designations have specific requirements, and the exact quality of the steps matters. The greatest treasure in numismatics is not simply the price tag. It is the discovery, the research, the history, and the knowledge that allows you to recognize something unusual when everyone else sees only an ordinary nickel. So keep searching, keep learning, and always verify extraordinary claims with real numismatic evidence. If you enjoyed this detailed exploration of the 1995 with P. Jefferson Nickel, make sure to subscribe to the channel for more videos about valuable U.S. coins, Jefferson nickels, Lincoln wheat pennies, Washington quarters, Roosevelt dimes, Kennedy half dollars, mint errors, double dies, full steps coins, rare varieties, grading, and the fascinating stories behind American coinage. Share this video with another collector, and if you have a 1995 with P. Jefferson Nickel, take a close look at yours before spending it. You may discover a characteristic that deserves a much closer examination, because sometimes the difference between an ordinary 5-cent coin and an extraordinary numismatic discovery can be hidden in the smallest detail.